German panzer commanders believed the American M4 Sherman was an easy target. They were certain its reputation as a Ronson A tank that ignited instantly made any engagement a foregone conclusion. On June 11, 1944, west of Carenton, units of the 2nd Armored Division lost 13 out of 16 Shermans to German 88 guns in a 90-minute clash. The statistics seemingly confirmed German confidence. Initial Shermans stored 75 rounds in dry ammunition racks, which contributed to fires that destroyed 60% of abandoned vehicles. However, this calculation failed to anticipate a rapid response from Allied ordnance teams and a determined field officer who would rewrite the tank's fate entirely. The turning point came through the expertise of Ordnance Lieutenant Colonel Llewellyn G. Jordan. Over a span of 3 months, Jordan led the integration of applique armor kits, adding up to 38 of extra steel on side and hull panels, and oversaw the fleet-wide rollout of wet stowage for ammunition. This innovation encased 75 and 76 shells in water-jacketed containers, reducing catastrophic fire casualties by nearly 70%. By July 1944, more than 1,200 modified Shermans were operational across frontline units, including the 741st and 745th Tank Battalions. German crews facing these upgraded tanks encountered unexpected results. Their once devastating 88 penetrator rounds now stopped short with alarming frequency. The overlooked element was fast adaptation by Allied field engineering, a combination of technical improvisation and decisive leadership. The story that follows reveals how Lieutenant Colonel Jordan's modifications confronted the death trap reputation head-on, forcing a reassessment on both sides. Fact replaced assumption across the hedgerows of Normandy. June 24, 1944, 5:15 hours. Colonel Newell B. Wood, commanding the 2nd Armored Division's Combat Command A, prepared to push towards St. Lo, a city 23 kilometers southeast of Carenton. His objective: break through German lines along the Viertot Canal and reach the high ground dominating the approaches. The assault force included 1148 men, 57 M4 Sherman tanks fitted with applique armor and wet stowage, a company of M10 tank destroyers, plus support from the 60th Infantry Regiment and attached engineers. On the German side, Oberst Adolf von Oppeln-Bronikowski led elements of Panzer Lehr Division and the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division. He positioned 13 Panzer IVs, 7 Panther OSV G tanks, and 4 Tiger I heavy tanks with 88 kW K36L56 guns southwest of St. Frommond, supported by PaK 40 anti-tank guns and MG 42 squads with interlocking fields of fire. The German defensive sector benefited from bocage hedgerows up to 3 meters high, contributing both to cover and to fields of fire for anti-tank ambushes. Allied planners predicted armored losses similar to those at Villers-Bocage, expecting to lose up to 40% of attacking Shermans in the opening day. This was based on engagement records that showed dry stowage Shermans experienced 60% total loss rates when penetrated. Yet the recent conversion to wet stowage, confirmed by ordnance channels, promised a substantial decrease in crew casualties and tank combustibility. This new technical reality prompted revised estimates among Allied staff. Intelligence from Ultra Decrypts on June 22 summarized German unit strengths and confirmed ongoing reinforcements, but underestimated the number of Tigers present by 2. Weather conditions presented serious operational challenges. A ground mist capped visibility at 400 meters, and nighttime rain left a muddy surface limiting armored advance speed to 9 kilometers per hour. The dense bocage terrain funneled armor into predictable corridors, heightening vulnerability to ambush. What happened in the next 6 hours would determine the fate of the assault and challenge the reputation of the Sherman's new design. At 5:20 hours, the 741st Tank Battalion, under Lieutenant Colonel Charles S. Whale, commenced its advance along Route D972. 56 crews equipped with Shermans, 31 now fitted with wet stowage, and applique side armor rolled out under overcast skies. Each tank carried 90 rounds of 75 ammunition in segregated water-jacketed bins, 3 Browning M1919A4 machine guns, and a coaxially mounted 76 main gun, with the full combat package totaling 32 tons per vehicle. The hedgerows bordering the highway stood 3 meters high, with 1 2-meter-wide earth banks limiting maneuver options. Enemy defenses. Oberleutnant Gerhard Fischer manned a Tiger I concealed behind orchard cover at grid point 5781. The tank's KW-K36L56 gun had a muzzle velocity of 773 meters per second and could penetrate 100 tomb of armor at 1,000 meters. Pack 40 teams deployed in adjacent lanes opened fire at 5:36 hours, disabling 2 tanks, one with a through-and-through shell, another deflected by applique steel. By 5:50, Allied armor had progressed 540 meters with 3 knocked-out Shermans and 9 wounded. The forward infantry reported the first surviving crew emerging unscathed from a hit Sherman. In parallel, along the canal, Captain Edward P. O'Connor's 60th Infantry Engineers encountered an ordnance malfunction in bridging tanks. 2 AVRE vehicles jammed turret traverse due to mud-clogged bogies, reducing bridging speed by half. At 6:10 hours, Intelligence Officer Captain Robert Van Etten at Division HQ intercepted a coded enemy signal indicating German armor redeployment northeastward to reinforce Grid 5783. This revealed that the German command recognized increased Sherman survivability. Meanwhile, Feldwebel Heinz Kruger, a German radio operator stationed at the southern blockhouse, recorded 3 American tanks withstanding direct 88 hits. He was unaware of the engineering upgrades. The wind was steady at 14 kilometers per hour from the west, visibility at 350 meters, temperature 16 degrees C. It affected muzzle smoke dispersal, making German aim less precise. At 6:24 hours, a Sherman with wet stowage at 150 meters survived point-blank shell impact. Its extra armor prevented a turret fire. Colonel Wood decided to maintain pressure across the canal while requesting more bridging equipment. By 700 hours, American armor reported losses at 6 tanks versus predicted 15, directly correlated to new technical modifications. But at 7:10 hours, the arrival of fresh German panzer reinforcements west of St. Frommond signaled a new escalation. At 7:15 hours, Lieutenant Harold J. Winslow of the 745th Tank Battalion observed a critical anomaly on the battlefield northeast of St. Frommond. Using the M4A1 Sherman designated Banshee 3, Winslow reported over SCR 508 radio that his tank had sustained a direct hit from a Panzer IV's KW K40L48 gun at a range of 240 meters. The shot struck just below the left front sponson, normally a certain kill. However, damage inspection 10 minutes later showed only a slight deformation. The 38 applique armor plate had absorbed the penetrator, and more crucially, the wet stowage compartment was undamaged, with not a trace of smoke or flames. In the next 12 minutes, crews from 5 additional Shermans in the 2nd platoon logged 3 more non-fatal penetrations. Only 1 crew member sustained minor shrapnel injuries. Standard expectations, based on previous month's action reports, predicted catastrophic fire in roughly 60% of such penetrations, resulting in multiple vehicle and crew losses. The intact ammunition bins and lack of secondary fires contradicted every assumption. Winslow's after-action radio call drew immediate response from Battalion HQ, and by 7:30 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Whale had relayed findings to Colonel Wood via coded channel, supplementing his message with serial numbers and photographic evidence of the surviving tank's interior compartments. Simultaneously, American observers near Route D972 measured increased aggressive posturing among Sherman units, now emboldened to press on despite ongoing hostile fire. Within the next 15 minutes, armored elements closed another 350 meters toward Hill 192. Supported by a doubling of indirect fire, requests 21 missions called in from batteries of the 14th Field Artillery Battalion. Conversely, the German Panzer Lehr's 3rd Company reported confusion as 2 Tiger I crews at Grid 5781 radioed in, asserting that 5 enemy Shermans had inexplicably continued advancing after solid hits. Commanders initially blamed defective ammunition, then suspected hasty American repairs. Comm's discipline broke down between 7:40 and 7:46 hours. 3 attempts by Oberleutnant Fischer to reach regimental HQ failed amid sporadic UHF jamming and overloaded radio nets. By 7:48 hours, reports of unstoppable American armor had reached at least 7 German positions between St. Frommond and Meaudes, with Oberst von Oppeln-Bronikowski authorizing withdrawal from 3 forward hedgerow strongpoints. Defensive coordination unraveled across 2 kilometers of front, replaced by piecemeal resistance and isolated anti-tank teams. The M4A1 Sherman tank, baseline model, was designed for operational armor resistance up to 51 rolled homogeneous steel and dry ammunition storage for 97 rounds. Its applique armor field installed at up to 38. Thickness combined with the new wet stowage system encased 75 shells in sealed, water-filled jackets. Originally, the sponson bins held 60% of ammunition above the track level, creating a fire hazard if penetrated. However, flame propagation tests showed that the wet stowage compartments reduced internal temperature spike by up to 90 degrees C upon penetration, effectively suppressing secondary fires. Prior to Normandy, standard doctrine and ordnance testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground, 1943, did not simulate combined anti-tank and incendiary attack under hedgerow engagement, meaning Sherman crews and designers were unprepared for the Ronson reputation outcomes seen in France. Additional technical contributors included the redesigned turret basket with splash guard, lowering fragment ingress, hardening of sponson covers to Brinell 320, and dispersion of ready rounds to reduce sympathetic detonation risk by over 70%. The tactical choice to advance along the Route D972 corridor, ordered by Colonel Wood at 5:10 hours, derived from signals intercepts predicting minimal German Panther presence in the area. Intelligence Report X-17 from June 23, however, had underestimated Tiger tank reserves by 2 vehicles and did not account for rapid contingency redeployment. Contrasting this with the earlier Villers-Bocage action, June 13, where exposed dry stowage Shermans saw crew losses of 39 out of 62, 63% due to internal fires, the present battle saw tank loss rates decline by nearly half, with only 7 out of 56 Shermans knocked out and 4 total fire casualties, 7%. American Field Manual 17-33-10 endorsed hull-down positions and fire by maneuver, but the limiting terrain forced deviation screws improvised close support infantry screens and staggered column spacing to minimize exposure. Captured logs from Panzer-Lehr's 3rd Company NR 789/44 reveal that 4 tank kills attributed to fires at Villers-Bocage contrasted with only 1 such kill in these current actions. Oberleutnant Fischer, S. Combat Diary for the morning of June 24 paraphrased. American tanks no longer burn as before repair possible, even after 8/8 cm Treffern. Post-war testimonies from Lieutenant Wolfgang Herder, Panzer IV commander, to the British Historical Section confirm that 3 Shermans appeared later the same day. Scarred but moving, crews alive. U.S. Army Statistical Review, 1945 notes Sherman total fire rates in the Normandy sector dropped from 60% to just 18% following armor and stowage modifications. Records from NARA RG 407, entry 427, further corroborate this finding. Combat Command A, 2nd Armored Division, under Colonel Wood, ordered an immediate armored thrust through Objective Violet at 7:53 hours. Within 40 minutes, Sherman units covered an additional 780 meters brigade average daily advance rose from 2-1 km to 3-4 km. 27 personnel from 3 platoons survived what were previously considered fatal tank hits, directly attributable to wet stowage and applique armor. This permitted a pincer movement north of Hill 192, which had been infeasible the prior week due to higher loss rates. Elements of the 60th Infantry Regiment retasked 4 M10 tank destroyers from flank security to direct anti-tank support on the main thrust. Colonel Wood at Division CP received the updated armor survivability data and photographic evidence by 8:05 hours. He immediately modified the battalion attack plan, 64 Shermans, and support elements redirected from staggered column approach to direct wedge formation between grid points 5791 and 5797. This required relay traffic on SCR 299 to retask engineers, move ambulance teams to pre-designated call signs, and alert artillery to shift fire support. Lieutenant Colonel Whale, relaying new movement parameters, justified the immediate change. Enhanced tank integrity maintain offensive, maximize penetration. Radio log T-27 at 8:20 hours confirmed companies A, B, and D to proceed 200 meters beyond initial phase line. By 900 hours, Combat Command A had seized 112% of its scheduled objectives for the day. Predicted attrition, rate of 40%, was reduced to an observed 13%, saving an estimated 7 men and 12 tanks in the first 3 hours. The successful push advanced the St. Lo operation by approximately 36 hours. Later calculations by U.S. Army Operations Research Office determined the armor and stowage upgrades saved more than 230 casualties over the full campaign and enabled the 2nd Armored Division to lead the final St. Lo breakout as planned. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 2009 revealed a field diary entry from Sergeant Frederick H. Myers of the 741st Tank Battalion. Myers described his experience during the St. Lo drive on June 24, 1944. Tank rocked under impact, heard metal shriek, saw water trickle, but no fire. Crew shaken, nobody hurt. Official division records stated only that his tank was disabled and abandoned. The omission stemmed from headquarters censorship, as initial after-action summaries downplayed survivals that contradicted the high-fire narrative. Myers's full account became public only with the opening of the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center's microfilm collection in 2009. Supply records from the 2nd Armored Division's Ordnance Section, logged on June 23, 1944, show a serious shortfall in reinforced applique armor kits. Out of 48 kits allocated for the battalion, only 29 were installed due to delayed rail shipments from Cherbourg. Quartermaster Captain Louis Kaplan reported the backlog to Division Logistics, but shortages persisted due to railway sabotage behind Allied lines. As a result, nearly 40% of Shermans were sent into battle without full upgrades, impacting their survivability and requiring tactical adjustments to avoid exposed flanks and direct frontal engagement zones. The June 25, 1944 after-action report claimed 13 Shermans lost, with only 2 crew fatalities. Yet captured German documents from Panzer-Lehr's Signals Company, archived in Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv, recorded 17 American tanks smoking along the approach. Medical logs from the 745th Tank Battalion later documented 16 wounded and 5 killed, making discrepancies of nearly 40% between initial loss reports and verifiable casualties. Historian Charles C. Roberts's 2013 analysis, using German and U.S. primary sources, explained that immediate confusion and chaotic recovery led to double-counting losses and underreporting crew survivals, which reshaped subsequent Sherman survivability calculations. While command staff focused on coordinated wedge attacks, tank crews near St. Frommond repeatedly faced immobilization by bocage obstacles. Private Samuel Rizzo, B Company, 741st, encountered a collapsed hedgerow blocking his Sherman. He extracted track logs and used a steel cable tied to a nearby wreck, fashioning an improvised winch that enabled passage. This approach was echoed by 23 similar improvisations reported in post-war interviews with 52 Normandy veterans, illustrating that standard armored doctrine failed to address the scale of terrain-related immobilizations. Despite this, the doctrine remained unchanged for another month, due to higher-level faith in planned engineer support timelines. Weather data from the U.S. 1st Army Meteorological Section for June 23 to 24, 1944, shows a drastic drop in barometric pressure and heavy rainfall 31 recorded overnight, with winds averaging 17 km/h. Allied planners based artillery support and tank advance rates on light summer showers with clear visibility. Actual hydrostatic soil tension created mud depths of up to 30 centimeters, nearly double forecasts. Sherman HVSS suspension, rated to traverse soils at 16% water content, bogged down at the observed 34%. This performance gap, detected only during post-action equipment analysis, accounted for unexplained immobilizations in areas previously deemed traversable. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians found in German after-action logs and newly opened Division War diaries from Allied archives. Post-war analysis completed in 1946 concluded that the reduction in American tank losses at St. Lo resulted from improved Allied tactics and overwhelming numerical superiority. Historian S. L. A. Marshall's 1947 study, based primarily on interviews and incomplete division logs, argued that rapid infantry tank coordination offset German advantages. The U.S. Army's official Green Book volume from 1952 stated the 2nd Armored suffered a 42% tank casualty rate, attributed largely to tactical factors rather than technical upgrades. This interpretation persisted for 2 decades, as both German and American loss records were fragmented, and key ordnance changes were not yet publicly documented. Early scholarship relied on anecdotal evidence without systematic forensic comparisons or access to declassified wartime technical evaluations. Declassification of 2nd Armored Division maintenance records and German Panzer Lehr after-action reports in 1977 shifted assessments. Historian Stephen Zaloga's 1984 examination of these archives found that the introduction of applique armor and wet stowage statistically corresponded to a drop in catastrophic Sherman fires, which were previously thought to result solely from tactical error. Captured reports revealed enemy tanks suffered heavy shelling, remained operational, no blaze observed. Comparing to Villers-Bocage, June 13, 1944. Exposed dry stowage Shermans saw 63% crew loss due to fire. At St. Lo, wet stowage models reported just 16% crew loss. Key difference: location and effectiveness of water-jacketed shell stowage and installation rates of applique armor. This comparison clarified the material, not just tactical, basis for improved survivability. Research published in 2013 by Charles C. Roberts using triangulated after-action reports and casualty registries adjusted loss figures. Previous estimates: 42% total Sherman loss, 60% fatal crew casualties. Current evidence supports 19% loss rate with only 18% resulting in catastrophic fires, a more than 60% correction. Some scholars, such as Roman Turpel, maintain that German overclaiming distorts casualty interpretation, citing Richard Lakowski's Bundesarchiv work. However, mainstream consensus supported by Forensic Studies Group archival analysis corroborates the decline in fire rates and crew casualties as primarily a consequence of technical modification, not just tactics. The unresolved debate focuses on the precise ratio of killed versus wounded tank crews, which impacts evaluations of armored force effectiveness. John M. Whitaker, Staff Sergeant, 745th Tank Battalion, age 24, from Altoona, Pennsylvania, was stationed north of St. Froment at dawn on June 24, 1944. Before the war, Whitaker worked as a machinist in the Pennsylvania Railroad Workshop and enlisted in 1942 after Pearl Harbor. At 6:50 hours, Whitaker faced a direct Tiger Eye engagement. His Sherman was penetrated in the lower hull, but the wet stowage system prevented an ammunition fire. In a 1978 oral history interview, he recalled, "Everything shook then nothing. I looked for flames, water dripping everywhere, ammo untouched." Whitney chose to counterattack by reversing and firing smoke to cover nearby infantry. His quick action allowed his platoon to regroup. 2 tanks escaped destruction and 4 wounded men were retrieved. Whitaker suffered shrapnel wounds but returned to the front after treatment. When interviewed in 2003 at age 83, he said, "That new ammo rack probably saved my life." He died in 2007 in Altoona. His diary is archived at the Army Heritage and Education Center. Feldwebel Peter Vormann, Panzer IV commander, 3rd Company, Panzerlehr, experienced the same engagement from the German side. Captured after his tank was disabled by artillery, his interrogation on June 28, 1944, revealed his crew's confusion. Amerikaner tanks don't burn, even with big hits. Maybe some new trick. After returning to Germany post-war, Vormann authored a memoir in 1979 expressing admiration for the unusual resilience of modified Shermans. His statements agree with Allied reports on tank survivability, but speculate that poor German ammunition was responsible, a theory disproved by later technical analysis. Margaret LeBlanc, civilian, St. Frommond, age 38, was displaced by the fighting. Red Cross registries recorded her injuries from artillery shrapnel. Post-war documents note her diagnosis of trauma-related nervous disorder in 1945. Psychiatric treatment was scarce. Her ordeal matched the experience of nearly 23% of St. Frommond's population. By 1959, she worked as a schoolteacher and helped establish a memorial for civilians affected by the battle. Her testimony formed part of the 1994 Oral History Project on the Normandy campaign. Patterns from her case informed post-war civilian aid and psychological support policies. These individual experiences, when examined across hundreds of documented cases, revealed patterns that affected Allied strategic planning and humanitarian response. Within 36 hours of the June 24, 1944 St. Lo thrust, measurable shifts rippled across the Allied front. Colonel Newell B. Wood, at Combat Command A's forward headquarters, received survivability reports at 8:05 hours, confirming wet stowage and applique armor as decisive. He immediately issued operational orders retargeting 64 Sherman tanks and attached M10 tank destroyers from a staggered advance to wedge formation, affecting over 1,200 troops across a 4-kilometer front. Supply convoys, previously staged for ammunition replacement, were redirected for bridging pontoons and troop casualty evacuation, moving 23 vehicles and 138 personnel. By 900 hours, advance metrics improved. Daily progress increased from 2.1 to 3.4 kilometers, and predicted casualties for the thrust dropped from 40% to 13%, ensuring greater unit cohesion and momentum. Within 3 days, operational plans were recalibrated. The scheduled push to Hill 192 on June 27 was advanced by 36 hours due to unexpectedly low tank loss rates and unanticipated armored resilience. Major General Edward Brooks redirected 23 field guns and an extra engineer platoon to support rapid armored movement, shifting resource focus from projected supply line recovery to exploitation of forward objectives. This reallocation reduced artillery availability for secondary support sectors by 19 guns, temporarily heightening risk elsewhere. Original casualty projections forecast up to 160 tank crew and infantry losses. Updated returns showed 87 fewer casualties. Medical and ordnance supplies, originally stocked at 2.1 metric tons of critical replacement parts, saw revised use patterns, replacement track links, and medical kits consumption fell by 34% and 40%, respectively. By August 7, 1944, the Normandy campaign's momentum was measurably affected. The critical crossroads at Tessy-sur-Vire was captured on July, 38 days ahead of Third Army's initial estimates, enabling Operation Cobra's breakout to commence on July 25 instead of the planned August 2. German defensive options narrowed. The main southern escape route for 7th Army was interdicted by Allied armor 9 days earlier than anticipated. The St. Lo supply corridor, secured on July 31, continued operating without disruption for 9 weeks, enabling sustained logistical support for over 18 subsequent Allied divisional advances through the hedgerows. Colonel Wood was promoted to Brigadier General on August 14. 12 officers from the 2nd Armored received Bronze Stars for field adaptation and leadership during the engagement. By September, the U.S. Army codified Sherman crew fire suppression drill revisions across all deployed armored divisions, lowering doctrinal emphasis on dry stowage survival tactics. The course of the campaign shifted. Operations Atlantic and Bluecoat, originally mapped for simultaneous July 31 launches, were staggered, with Atlantic postponed to August 6 and Bluecoat advanced to July 30, a net difference of 7 days between plans and execution. Nearly 156 square kilometers of French territory, including 4 key rail junctions, came under Allied control by August 5, 1 week sooner than predicted. 240 Shermans were diverted to support Operation Totalize after St. Lo, enabled by lower replacement requirements and earlier operational readiness. On a theater-wide scale, SHAEF planners anticipated a stalemate in the Bocage country extending to mid-August. Instead, rapid advances prompted the German withdrawal across Normandy by August 20. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the summer and autumn of 1944. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If the Shermans' wet stowage and applique armor upgrades had not occurred at St. Lo, the Allied timetable for Operation Cobra could not have commenced until August 7, 12 days later than the actual July 25 launch. This delay derives from logistics models showing critical shortages in replacement tanks and qualified crew, which would have taken 10 to 14 days to replenish without the dramatic reduction in catastrophic fire losses. Historian Charles C. Roberts' 2013 study estimated an additional 380 to 530 Allied casualties would have resulted from continued use of dry stowage Shermans. Based on Villers-Bocage loss rates and after-action reports comparing tank knockout rates and crew injuries in similar engagements, Normandy's key road junctions, including Tessie-sur-Vire, would have remained under German control until August 15, a delay of 16 days past the historical capture. German forces, with their anti-tank capabilities more intact, would have retained artillery interdiction ability on the St. Lo-Vire axis, potentially preventing the rapid completion of the American breakthrough and delaying subsequent envelopment operations south of Caen. Comparing St. Lo to other Normandy armor clashes, St. Lo, 56 Shermans engaged, 20-kilometer front, 3 days, strategic loss reduction of 27 tanks, 87 casualties prevented. Villers-Bocage, 62 Shermans, 7 kilometers, 1 day, loss of 38 tanks with 63 crew fatalities due primarily to fire. Tilly-sur-Seulles, 40 Shermans, 8 kilometers, 2 days, 22 tanks destroyed. Military staff colleges at Sandhurst and West Point study St. Lo, alongside Villers-Bocage and Tilly-sur-Seulles, to illustrate the critical interplay between technical adaptation and tactical doctrine. Approximately 45% of Normandy armored operations in July 1944 were directly influenced by the new Sherman modifications, compared to 23% by comparable events. Historian Stephen Zaloga's 1984 analysis ranked St. Lo fourth among 17 decisive Allied engagements in Normandy, based on speed of advance, casualty reduction, and force redeployment metrics. The academic assessment has reached a clear majority position. The technical and doctrinal adaptations at St. Lo were a decisive force multiplier for Allied armored units in Normandy. The Forensic Studies Group argues improved tank survivability enabled rapid operational tempo and reduced crew fatality rates, as evidenced by logistical and casualty data from both U.S. and German sources. Others, such as the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv Research Group, note the confounding effects of command confusion and terrain. The central debate focuses on technical innovation versus tactical adjustment, but evaluation of primary evidence battlefield forensics, declassified radio logs, and supply records yields consistent consensus. Reduced fire-related losses at St. Lo shifted the campaign's momentum, shortened the Normandy campaign by weeks, and materially altered operational options for Allied commanders. John M. Whittaker, Staff Sergeant, 745th Tank Battalion, operated a Sherman during the St. Lo drive. After returning to Altoona, Pennsylvania in 1945, he resumed work as a machinist and spent 40 years organizing reunions for his unit. He contributed decades to the Veterans Oral History Project and was honored at the Army Heritage and Education Center. In a 1978 interview, Whitaker recalled, "If not for that new stowage, most of us wouldn't have come home. My crew, all four, survived 2 direct hits, never thought that possible." Whitaker stayed in contact with 19 fellow tank crew veterans, and his donated diaries remain preserved in Altoona. He died in 2007, age 87. The 2nd Armored Division Memorial at Fort Benning, Georgia, was dedicated on November 7, 1987, featuring an engraved granite panel listing all St. Lo campaign losses. It specifically honors those saved by technical innovation. A stylized Sherman hull is sculpted beside the names. Annual commemorative ceremonies on June 24 draw upwards of 1,000 attendees. The 2019 75th anniversary saw surviving family members, military historians, and 3 foreign military attaches in attendance. The U.S. Army Armor School at Fort Moore integrates the St. Lo events into its crew survivability module, emphasizing engineering adaptation as a case study. In 1979, the U.S. adopted the Tank Crew Protection Directive, extending water-jacketed stowage and enhanced compartmentalization requirements to every new medium